Glide baits are becoming massively popular in the tournament scene, but they're still really intimidating for a lot of guys to gain confidence in. So let's go over the 5 main mistakes that rookie glide bait anglers make when starting to try to learn to throw these big swim baits. The first question that I get asked the most from rookie glide bait anglers is, what color do I throw? And look guys, don't overcomplicate this. You don't need something with all kinds of different hues in there and like, oh, it needs a streak of gold here, streak of chartreuse there, a little bit of blue there. 2 main colors. Something bone and something that looks like a shad. The most important parts of these big swim baits is 1, profile, 2, size, and 3, action. Those are the most important parts. Color is way down on the list in order of importance, so don't overcomplicate it. Bone works really, really well because it really imitates a dying bait fish really well. It's very visible and it works good up until that 3.5, 4 foot of visibility. If I'm over that, I switch to something shad. Now the big caveat to that is if you have a lot of bluegill in your lake, if you live up north, a lot of yellow perch, some golden shiner, outside situations like that, when your primary bait forage is not a shad, that's when you're gonna kind of substitute the bone and shad color for bone and other bait fish colors. So color, keep it simple. The second main question is, when do I throw this thing? Now, I have a glide bait on my front deck pretty much all times of year, but the best times to throw this thing, the times that I get the most attention from the fish, is when the water temperature in the spring kind of gets over that low 50s, so 53, 54 mark. It starts getting a lot better all throughout the summer and into the fall until it gets really, really cold. I will still keep it honest throughout the winter time, because anytime that they're on those bigger than average bait fish, I try to lean on a glide bait. I try to get their attention on a big bait. But above that 53, 54 degree mark is when it really starts coming alive. In the spring, in the fall, those are the best times of years to throw it. Best conditions possible. When I go outside in the morning and I see those really, really big poofy clouds, I know I'm going to catch them on a glide bait that day. Usually that is the best kind of sky conditions I can ask for when throwing those big swim baits. The third issue that most rookie big swim bait fishermen face is that they're afraid to lose the bait. Look, these baits get expensive. They start out in that kind of $40, $50 range and go all the way up until $300, $400, $500, $600. They get crazy expensive. And most people, when they spend a lot of money on a fishing lure, they don't want to throw it because they don't want to lose it. The best way I can explain it is treat it like a tournament. Once your entry fee is in, it's gone. And I mean, unless you're pleasantly surprised and you do well in the tournament, get your money back and then some. But for the most part, that money is gone. Treat your glide bait the same way, because if you don't treat it that same way, you're not going to be able to put this thing in the place that it needs to go in order to get the fish to bite. You're not going to get close enough to those rocks. You're not going to get close enough to that dock. You're not going to throw it up next to a laydown because you're afraid to lose it. And if you're afraid to lose it and not put it in those situations, you're just not going to get the attention from the fish that you would otherwise have if you put it in those locations. So like I said, best tip on that is just consider that money gone. Enjoy the bait. Enjoy the results that you get from throwing a big swim bait, and don't be afraid to lose it. 4, guys don't know where to throw these baits. So best advice I can give you here is look for the most obvious structure on the lake. Look for that big point that has the creek channel butting right up against it. There's some big rock up there and maybe a laydown. That's the most, like, the place that when you look at a map or look at the lake and it screams out at you like, hey, fish there. Fish that, but figure out how to fish it with a bigger than average bait. Most guys are going down the lake throwing a spinner bait at it, flipping a jig at it, cranking. People aren't throwing 7, 8, 9, 10-inch swim baits up against those things, and it's something that those fish have never seen. Side tip here, change up your angle a little bit. Notice how every bait is fishing that piece of structure, and then put your boat in a different position and make a cast in a different direction than what those fish are typically seeing those baits come. All right, and 5. The last tip that I'm going to give you today for those rookie swim bait fishermen that are just trying to get into it is they don't have confidence in the bait. Look, this is a big one, and it's really hard to gain confidence in throwing a swim bait. And I mean, any bait for that matter. Like, guys took forever to learn how to throw a chatterbait correctly, and now you look back on that and you're like, man, that was super easy. I don't know what the big hang up was. Same thing with the glide bait. Leave every other rod at home, leave every other bait at home, and just take your big swim baits out there. And if you're not used to throwing something this big, it's going to amaze you how much attention they get. Look, The amount of times that, like, as fishermen, we've seen the big old forks of a gizzard shad or a big old bluegill sitting in some big female bass's stomach. Like, you notice, like, oh, these fish are feeding on bigger than average fish. And just because this is a little bit bigger than that 5-inch Senko that you threw doesn't mean that the fish aren't going to bite it. They're biting, like, this is a 7-inch baby boss. This is a tiny bait fish compared to what most 3.5, 4-pounders are eating on a daily basis. So don't be afraid to throw the big baits. I promise you, if you spend a little bit of time with them, you're going to get a lot of attention to bass, and you're probably going to catch some bigger fish because of it. And one more thing on that. So most guys, when they're starting out swim bait fishing, are like, all right, I'm going to start with this little 4-inch swim bait because it's closer to what I think a size of bait that I feel comfortable throwing. Look, this is counterintuitive because you really lose that drawing power if you throw any bait less than 6 inches. And drawing power is the big name of the game with these big swim baits. It's less of a hunger strike, it's less of a reaction strike, and it's more of a territorial strike for bass. They're looking at it and they're not like, man, I want to eat that thing. Most of the time, they're like, that thing's in my area, it looks sick, it looks weak, I've got to finish that thing off because I don't want it living in my lake and I don't want it living in my home. So that's why a glide bait works so well, and why the bigger you go, the more drawing power you have. Like 7 inches still doesn't have a ton of drawing power, but when you get to that 9, 10, 11-inch swim bait, those things have a ton of drawing power and are going to have almost a magnet effect on bass. Now the converse to that is the bigger you go, especially that 10, 11, 12 inches, is typically you're going to start getting a few less bites. They're going to get maybe a little bit more intimidated by the bait. So that's why I recommend guys starting out, start in that 6 to 8-inch swim bait range. You're going to get a lot of attention. It's big enough to have a lot of drawing power, but it's small enough that you're not going to cut down on your bites. That's the 5 tips that I've got for any new swim bait fisherman. Listen to these tips again and really focus on them and wrap your mind around them. And I promise, next time you go to the lake, you're going to have a better shot at catching more fish on those big swim baits.